WGBH Boston.
Last week, TJX, the parent company of Marshalls and TJ Maxx, announced that the company had suffered a security breach. Someone hacked into their computers, getting a hold of more than 200,000 credit and debit cards. Customers have been frustrated, and the company has done little to help. Now, at least, they admit the problem is widespread. Greater Boston's Jared Bowen has more.
As feared, it appears hundreds of thousands of debit and credit cards have been compromised by the security breach at TJX. While TJX, parent company of stores like Marshalls and TJ Maxx, knew its computers had been hacked in December, customers only found out last week.
I have written checks here quite often, so I'm going to be careful watching my checking account.
I'm a little nervous about using my credit card there a second ago.
The breach, TJX says, involved customer transaction information stored in its computer systems. The fact that it happened doesn't surprise analysts, but the scope of the breach does.
Security breaches are not uncommon, but they tend to be much smaller in nature and to be found rather quite a bit sooner before you get a massive amount of customer information compromised.
Attorney General Martha Coakley, recently the victim of credit card fraud herself, said on Greater Boston last week her office will address companies' roles in preventing fraud.
So what we need to do is make sure that companies understand their responsibility to keep it secure. When it has been breached, they need to obviously investigate that.
Already, nearly 60 Massachusetts banks are responsible for covering the fraudulent charges. But new legislation on Beacon Hill would shift the cost of direct fraud crimes from banks to companies themselves. Until then, the chief responsibility of companies like TJX is to restore customer trust.
This is for long term. You know, people have your social security numbers, they have your address, they know your bank account. This could, it could ruin your life.
Today, TJX declined to comment.
All right, and with me now are Bruce Spitzer of the Mass Bankers Association and Representative Michael Costello of Newburyport, who has sponsored 2 bills to address credit card fraud. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Bruce, if I do say so myself, TJX has done a lousy job of trying to assuage anyone's concerns and fears about this. They're basically giving customers and the media zero information. What should they be doing in terms of telling people, advising people, letting them know how they can even find out if their credit card has been breached?
In fact, their response or lack of a response has been quite a mystery to us. So if they had done this well, they would have notified people sooner and started working with banks sooner. Instead, we're kind of backtracking and trying to figure out what the extent of the problem is, and they're not indicating what the extent of the problem is.
Is it because they don't know and they're trying to get a handle on it, or is this some way
That's
they're
the
just trying to keep
speculation.
the whole thing secret?
The speculation is that maybe they don't know themselves, and so until they do know the full scale of it, they're not reporting it. But again, that's me talking, not them, so it is speculation.
Representative Costello, explain your proposed legislation here. As I understand it, right now, if I have a credit card and it's on Bank of America or Citibank or something like that, and I get some fraudulent charges, basically the bank has to eat those extra charges.
Correct,
You're suggesting that if it's their fault, if TJX blew the security breach, not somebody stole my credit card, they should assume. How would that work?
Well, it's a common sense approach. It says, wherever the breach occurred, let's look to that person to remedy the situation afterwards. But more importantly, what we try to do in the bill, and there's 2 bills, and the comprehensive approach is at identity theft, trying to prevent it and then trying to prosecute it after it happens. But it would basically, the bill that your direct point would encourage people like TJX to take seriously how they hold people's information. Some of this information goes back to 2003 that they were holding that was breached. And when do they get notified? That's a great question. Under the current law, there's no notification requirement. If you lived in California and it was TJX in California, you'd be notified right away. My bill says 5 days. Once a breach occurs, you have 5 days to affirmatively notify customers.
So you were specifically talking about companies where there has been some kind of security breach, not if Emily Rooney's credit card gets stolen and somebody goes to, Bob's Sports.
Correct.
You're saying this has got to be when a company is really responsible,
yeah,
not an individual.
A commercial entity that makes a profit off of your information, or that holds your information for profitable purposes. So a bank, we talked about, the banks are pushing this legislation. They, in fact, themselves could be accountable if they breached. But banks have been sophisticated in the way they encrypt their information, the way they hold people's information. And basically the banks are saying we want entities to use those same standards. They derive a profit. They should invest some of that profit into these encrypting systems, etc. Now,
obviously crude, because if somebody can hack in, and they could literally get somebody's checking account number?
That may be dependent upon what the company is storing, and this is what we're saying. If they have good encryption and if they're not storing data, this is not a problem. Not storing data that they're not supposed to. We support Representative Costello's bill simply because this is not about assessing blame. It's not about pointing the finger at any one retailer. We're simply saying if you're a company, and you could be a retailer, you could be a bank, or you could be a processor, if you make a mistake, you should be responsible for covering the costs of that mistake, and including banks.
One of the things that I was a former prosecutor in Essex County before, and the crimes of identity theft were what you saw with the Attorney General. A credit card was stolen, or misuse of a credit card. You'd have to prosecute in Lynn one charge. You'd have to prosecute in Peabody another, down in the South Shore if the card transferred. Our bill basically has 4 points. It says, look, we're gonna give you a duty. We're gonna create this duty of holding information securely. If you breach that duty, we're gonna request or require a notification, immediate notification. Once notification has occurred, what can a consumer do? Right now, you put this fraud alert on your credit card, which hampers your ability to access credit. It's a nightmare to put it on, to keep it on. We say we want an immediate freeze of your credit card, of the reporting agencies, the 3 major reporting agencies, and that protects you. If TJX had told people within 5 days of a breach, that their credit had been compromised, they could put a freeze on their credit, and then wherever they tried to get a new credit card.
As I understand it, though, they haven't told anybody anything.
Which is outrageous.
I happened to buy something in Florida at a Marshall's about 2 weeks ago. I mean, I don't know. But I mean, are they not notifying people by email or by telephone? They're not telling anybody anything. So the first time, as I understand it, that I'll know is if I see an odd charge on my credit card, right?
Or if your bank will contact you if it has been contacted by the card companies and your card is in one of those batches that may have been compromised. So the good news here, though, is that if you're a consumer, you have protections in place to protect you against fraud. If fraud does occur, and by no means fraud is not going to take place in every case, but if it does occur, you're covered for that cost. But that's another cost that banks must absorb on your behalf. So the bank where you do business is working very hard on your behalf if you're one of those customers.
Yeah, the banks have been are the companies resisting this change, this legislation? Because suddenly the burden, it's going to mean their loss.
Right. Mass Retailers Association is probably the biggest opponent because they are going to be responsible. But quite frankly, until you hold them responsible, no one's going to take this seriously. They benefit from us coming in and either online or giving you the card or making it convenient for you to go in and buy the product. They just
they take the cues, the telephone companies. I mean, the whole thing that used to happen with the cloning of the telephone companies always took responsibility for that. But
right. Well, it's amazing when Emily, when you see, and I've. As a legislator, hearing the stories and filing the bill, we've seen, it started with Choice Point. Over 300,000 people's information was gone. The veterans got hacked into this year. I mean, every week you're hearing a bigger and bigger story. This happens to be the story that everyone's been to Marshall's or to TJ Maxx. We've all been there. And so all of our credit's at risk. And we shouldn't have the affirmative duty of calling TJ Maxx or TJX and saying, hey, was it our card that was compromised?
And you wouldn't get an answer if you did.
Right now, and they're saying it's law enforcement. I can't, for the life of me, understand what law enforcement agency. It'll be interesting to see what they say is the law enforcement agency that's told them not to give this information out. But I think BJ's, last time it happened with the BJ's wholesale, the FTC came down pretty hard, and we hope to
apparently these people learn nothing from the Tylenol scare.
Right.
All right, Bruce Spitzer and Representative Michael Costello. Thank you so much.